Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Great Israel-Palestine Debate. For those who are joining us for the first time, the Great Israel-Palestine Debate is live conversations about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Our goal is to facilitate productive and vibrant conversations about one of the most complex conflicts in history. The idea is to bring people together from all sides of the ideological spectrum, from all sides of the border, together to dialogue with the goal of bringing them together towards common ground. That's what we're here to do. We call this a debate because essentially what we're doing is debating many issues, but it's not your usual debate where one side is trying to defeat the other, where everyone's trying to get their one-line zingers to make it seem like they got the other person. The goal here, the way to win this debate is for both sides to find common ground, for both sides to listen to one another, respect one another, and see what they can eventually agree on. And even if they don't find common ground on anything, at least they can learn from one another. And this is true not only for those debating, but this is also true for the audience. Today, we're going to do something slightly different. Normally, I bring on two people and I moderate the conversation between them. Today, we just have Inon Dan Kehati on. Inon Dan Kehati is the founder of The Home and Cleaning the Hate. He will tell you about those organizations very soon. Since he does not have an opponent, it's going to be my goal to ask him the tough questions, and I will be asking tough questions. So, Inon, I hope you came prepared, because I won't be easy on you. It's easier for me to go hard on Inon because Inon and I have been friends for many years now. We have many ideological differences, but at the end of the day, you know, we're good friends, and I think it's fair to say we agree on most things. By chance, the topic we're discussing today is an area where probably we do not agree on everything, and I guess that will be reflected in the conversation. We will leave a good amount of time for audience questions. So drop your questions in the chat. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Not only questions, comments, concerns, everything. We want to hear from you. If you want to get in touch with Inon, either me or Inon, in the description, you will see our social media platforms. That way you can connect with us. You can reach out to us after the debate. We're both very happy to engage in dialogue, so we'd love if you reached out. Great. So without further ado, Inon Dan Kehati, welcome.
Erev Tov, welcome. Thank you very much for initiating this. And Erev Tov lekulam, good evening, everyone. So again, thank you very much, Adar, for initiating this and for your amazing platform that you create a lot of interesting conversations and discussions. The last one with Rudy and Saif. And I must say that, to develop this, people that don't necessarily agree and to have them together at the same platform while they know they disagree, but in a respectful discussion, that's part of the path towards peace, of bringing people from different identities, different opinions, and different views, and not necessarily agree on everything, but do have the respect to think together and understand where the other is coming from without having to agree with 100% of the things. And with that, I will introduce myself. My name is Inon. You want to ask something?
Me? No, I was just nodding. I liked what you said, so I nodded.
All right, so my name is Inon. I'm from Jerusalem, originally from Kehatl, which is a suburb of Tel Aviv. And about 6 years ago, I founded an organization called The Home, which is a platform for cooperation between Jews and Palestinians, especially creating connection between the Jewish community and the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria or the West Bank, in order to develop connection between hostile communities that live in close proximity to each other. And we do this activity, coffee talks, activity called Cleaning the Hate, which is we take Jews and Palestinians to clean up trash together, to show mutual respect to the land. And while we do that, we also diffuse the hostility between people from hostile communities that lower their ego down, picking up trash, and basically creating a different atmosphere from most of the peace organizations. And we also promoting an idea which is restoring Israeli sovereignty and including Palestinians within Israel, and not the two-state solution, even though we are open to discuss about any political idea, as long as it's coming from the land. And about myself.
Right, Inon, just to clarify, you said as long as it's coming from the land. Was that you implying that you're open to hear any solution as long as it's not coming from like America or the European Union, as long as it's coming from Israelis and Palestinians who are living here, who have skin in the game?
Definitely. I think it's a must. Therefore, the Trump plan, even though it's pro-Israeli, I don't see it as a legitimate plan, because if it's not coming from people here that don't consider the identities of both people here, it's not legitimate in my opinion, and it doesn't matter if it's pro-Israeli or anti-Israeli. And, so what we basically do is creating a movement that will bring people with different identities and different ideas also. We want to create the energy of bringing, not the usual peace industry that comes from either Tel Aviv or Ramallah, but people that live in close proximity in hostile communities. We want to bring them into the table, because I think that once they will fix their things, and by the way, these communities are also very similar regarding tradition, more people that preserving religion, whether it's Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, of course. But, they have also more, they suppose they have more mutual interests based on the geographical area that they share. And since we want to build, a joint future and not a future in separation, so this is basically what we focused on. And regarding the home and myself, this movement is basically founded by me. I mean, with no budget from outside, with no support, neither from the Israeli government or the European Union or the Americans. And it's so simple. And I want to explain to people, try to explain to people before we touch on the vision of the home. It's all about bringing people to a cafe or a restaurant, getting something very modest like, some snacks, some tea, some coffee. Of course, coffee is a must. And get them into an environment that they can, we do a round that everyone introduce themselves and say where they're from and what is their expectation from this meeting. And then we do the cleanups, which also doesn't cost almost anything. And we do conferences where we bring either activists, Jewish or Palestinians, or public figures. Like we brought Dr. Mordechai Kehdar, who I think is one of the very, very essential person with thinking that very important for the peace process, in my opinion, especially with this Emirate plan that we will touch later on. And people like Gershon Cohen and even Gershon Baskin that represent completely the other side of what we promote. And people like Kay Wilson, Woody Rochman, that was also on your show last time.
Yeah.
We basically want to bring to the stage, and of course, Palestinians that really want to speak up but cannot do that because the PA basically take them into either jail or interrogations, and doesn't allow freedom of speech. And everyone knows that, but it's kind of under the table. So this is basically what we do. And
so,
yeah.
Just to summarize, because it sounds like there's three things. One is these meetings between Israelis and Palestinians, and the idea is to talk about potential solutions to the conflict and just build some kind of a peace plan together, Israelis and Palestinians side by side. That's one. The second is Israelis and Palestinians.
If I may, it's not only to talk about vision, but also to plan things. Also, if there's problems that happens, let's say in Efrat and a Palestinian village of Husan or even Aida camp, to raise it up and try to solve it with connections to the other side that cannot be done in an official way. Also stuff like that.
Cool. And then there's Cleaning the Hate, which I think is brilliant. It's about Israelis and Palestinians coming together to clean the land. we're fighting over the land we love, then why is it so fucking dirty? Like, that it almost doesn't make sense. So essentially what you're doing is saying, if you love this land, let's see that you love it. Let's come together and clean it together. So it's not only a way, it's a way to unify Israelis and Palestinians around, a common love, which is the land.
Common love, and also to show the hypocrisy that all of us basically do, because we call it either our homeland or the Holy Land or whatever. When Palestinians call all of the land Palestine, I respect that. If they respect also that I call all of the land Israel, but we treat it like a dumpster. More or less all of us, and in some places it's more, some places it's less, but it kind of shows our hypocrisy towards a value that we're supposed to cherish, and the love for the land. Why we fight for this land, which is supposed to be so holy, but we treat it like either trash can or an ashtray. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's the simple things, and also psychologically wise, I think that once somebody fix a small problem like picking up a cigarette butt, that it's not even him that threw it out, and he fixed a wrongdoing of someone else without the ego, it also builds psychologically, I think, something very healthy. And once you do it between people from hostile communities, and they do something together which is so simple, but the value that it reflects is a value of equality, because we do it from eye to eye. We have no differences basically when we clean.
Right.
Even though, of course, I mean, maybe you and I will disagree, but I don't think that human beings are equal. I think that we're all unique. We all have different, different desires, different identities, different needs, different goals. But in the end of the day, we all created in the image of God, of Hashem. Whether you believe in pasta, it's all good too.
So you asked if I agree. I mean, yeah, I don't think anybody's equal, but I think we should all be equal under the law.
True.
Sure, right. Yeah.
True, but I think that also to be equal under the law and to really build peace, and peace is about unity. And unity, real unity, cannot come from uniformity. I mean, it's not like, Soviet Russia, that everyone has to think the same, do the same, and, people have freedom of choice and free will. So if we will not recognize that we are different pieces in one big puzzle, and if we will not gather all the parts of the different parts of the puzzle into this one frame, and also define which parts, are for the frame, which parts are in the middle, which parts are in the top right, top left, down right, down. We want to create the whole image.
I would, and this is just a semantic suggestion, but I would suggest maybe not saying people are unequal, because I mean, technically it's true, but it gives people the impression that some people have more intrinsic value than others. So I would maybe say we're equal but different. And then it's like it acknowledges that we all have the same intrinsic value, but we're all vastly different. Yeah.
Right. What I'm trying to say is basically that we are unique. And of course, we need to have equality under the law. We need to strive, and we must strive for a shared future and for unity, but in no way uniformity, because it's also impossible. We cannot be all the same,
So it sounds like you're slowly leading us into what the Home's solution to the Israel-Palestine conflict is, correct? Because it's about people representing themselves. You know better than me. Let's get into it. Tell us what you see the solution to this century-old conflict is.
Okay, so first and foremost, regarding the solution, I understand that it's not my, let's say, my authority to say what's going to be the solution. I can think about, different alternatives. And by the way, I think it's a must to think about different alternatives, because clearly something is not working. I mean, the peace organization, for example, Peace Now, we're coming with that slogan, Peace Now, 40 years ago, and there's still no peace under the frame of division of the land and two-state solution. So basically what we promote in the Home, and this is the end game. Now, strategically wise, in order to get to the end game, we need to do steps beforehand in order to reach to the end game. And I represent this idea is basically representing not only my thinking, but also Palestinians and Jews thinking together. And we combined an idea that basically says that we need to work under steps and eventually become one state or Israeli sovereignty all over the land, that is going to be divided without borders, but divided into cantons or emirates, that each and every population will have their own mini states under the one state, which is Israel. And Palestinians, therefore, will become either residents or citizens of Israel. And it also comes with conditions, of course, like everything in life. And basically, yeah.
How does one become a citizen or a resident? Like what's the difference, and what does it entail? What rights do you get with each?
Basically, resident is equal to human rights. That means that you have the freedom of movement all over the land, the freedom to live in the big cities, the freedom to work wherever you want, study wherever you want, protection under the law, equality under the law. But you don't have political rights, because political rights, in my opinion, should be only for people that are going to do their political duties and to do something for the system, for the state that they live in. And that should be also equal to Jews and non-Jews alike. And it means that if you don't do civil service in your canton or emirate, if you don't do army service, and the army will not be inside the Palestinian towns and villages and with military rule like it is now. And if you're not going to do police service, whether you are Jew from, I don't know, Haredi Jew or secular Jew or Palestinian, if you're not going to do these simple things that are political chores to the system you live in, then you will not get the right to vote or the right to be elected. And I think it's fair, because in that way you will have only people that contributing to the system that they live in, and therefore I think it's very fair. So, for example, let's say a Haredi Jew that now automatically get citizenship and the right to vote and to be elected. But if he doesn't go to the army, by the way, many Haredim does go to the army. But if he doesn't go to the army or doesn't do his civil service or whatever, then I don't think that he's supposed to vote for the Knesset. Same thing about the leftists in Tel Aviv that don't go to the army, or Palestinians that will not want to do these.
So it would need to be some kind of civil service. It could be some kind of community work. It could be joining the IDF, or it could be joining the police force, correct?
Correct. And by the way, the police force is going to be combined by Palestinians and Israelis. I mean, for example, if Bethlehem will be part of Israel one day, it's going to be an emirate or a canton inside Israel. And a Palestinian will go to be a police officer in Bethlehem, or will do a civil service in Bethlehem. Then he will have the right to be a citizen and be elected to the Knesset too.
Right. Are you concerned that a system like this will be very easy to manipulate? So military and police will be difficult because it's a national service, but the second you have civil service, imagine the civil service you're going to do is within your own community, and if it's a tight-knit community, they could very easily make it seem like people are doing civil service just so everybody gets voting rights, but not actually need to commit to the work. Like, are you worried that there will be corruption? Because it seems like something that will be very hard to manage on a large scale.
Look, I don't think that there's going to be a utopia. Of course, there's going to be corruption because it's kind of a human nature. But I think it's going to do more justice for all, because people will be equal under the law regarding what they contribute to the system. So even if they will not do their duties to the system, they will still have equal human rights. But those people, think about people that do the civil duties for the system that they live in. For example, I go to the army at the age of 18, and I stay in the army until 21. But someone else that doesn't go to the army can go straight to the university at the age of 18 and have advantage over me. So in a way, also, it's not fair in a way. So, but to touch, we now touch kind of the end game, which takes a lot of time to develop, and but there's something more about the end game that I believe in, and also the home promotes, is that whatever going to be the end game regarding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, it must come in a peace stance. It's going to be in a very special place in this land, which is the Temple Mount. And I think it's also important to say that thing because I don't believe that without change, a real change in the dynamics of how we see each other, there's going to be even on the ground changes regarding politics, similar to the idea that I just expressed to you of the cantons or one state or one Israeli sovereignty. There must be also something that's going to create the change of the dynamics that we will not see each other as enemies or, like we Jews sometimes see a lot of Palestinians as potential terrorists automatically without even, figuring out who the person in front of us is. So therefore, I think that when there's going to be initiation politically on the ground, before that, this has to be a peace stance, a peace ceremony on Temple Mount, which is the most symbolic place in our conflict, both to Jews and Palestinians, that, if you imagine such ceremony, by the way, think about, the Oslo Accords, the Oslo Agreements, where the ceremony of the initiation was?
Yeah, it was in Oslo or no, in Washington, D.C.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It was 10,000 kilometers away, done by political leaders and dictators that really represented their people in a legitimate way. And also courtesy of a foreign country, the United States, basically gave us a piece of paper. Rabin and Arafat signed it, and we all know how it ended. So it also has to have a significance, meaning of spirituality that if you think about this ceremony, that I think that all the leaders of the world must be there attending, and it must be led by the leaders of the Jewish and the Palestinians. And I think about the day afterwards, I don't think that we're gonna look at each other, Jews and Palestinians, after that kind of stance. And I think that also we have the potential to inspire humanity because the focus on this land is so big, even though we are so small, even though we are tiny, regarding humanity, what is the percentage of Jews and Palestinians here? It's maybe less than 1%. But
it's the sexiest conflict in the world. Everybody wants in. Everybody wants to be involved.
Everyone wants to have their status, and sometimes, and many times, even with good intentions, foreign entities and foreign powers do it on our expense, eventually, without really understanding our deep identity and deep aspirations. And whatever I'm going to say, going to be the solution, the fact of the matter is, and nobody can dispute what I'm going to say, all the peace industry, regarding all the efforts, regarding all the funds, regarding all the time, regarding all the influence, zero success. Zero. And I mean zero, because with all this thing, we still have the conflict, and there's still no peace, and there's still no, human rights, and there's still war basically going on. So something must also change in the peace industry, but I don't think that they have the open-mindedness to really go for it,
Yeah, there's also a misalignment of incentives. Again, I'm not accusing anybody from the peace industry of doing this, but when there's institutions that are alive because we don't have peace, then they kind of have an interest that we will not have peace. And it's the same with governments who run platforms based off security and protection. Well, again, it's possible that you run a platform based off security and you genuinely want peace, but your incentives are not really aligned so well, because the second that happens, the power you attained is much less relevant because you attained it in a time of war, and now you're in a time of peace, and it's not clear that you will be as relevant in this new system. So the status quo kind of has, a way of maintaining itself. They don't want big change. That often isn't good for individuals like you and I, or our brothers and sisters, our Palestinian brothers and sisters. So I'm with you on that.
Just got addicted to the status quo, so regular to the status quo that The system is basically regulating it without us having the ability to think outside of the box about something different.
Right. Yeah. I just want to go back to what you said about Temple Mount. So you see like a big ceremony on Temple Mount. This is like the starting a new, the path towards peace. Like instead of what they did in Washington D.C., just doing that in Temple Mount. Is that what?
I see basically the translation of the verse from the Torah that says, "In my house will be a house of prayer for all people," and also verses from Prophet Isaiah, Yeshayahu, "V'naharu kol hagoyim le'ar bet Hashem," and all the people will go to the mountain of Hashem, to the Temple Mount. I basically try to, and by the way, also the political solution, it must also have political values from the Torah translated to our time in modern way, not in a regression. Basically to translate ideas from the Torah and the prophets to our time in a way that will achieve peace. And also inspire people to, many people also don't know about, these values from the Torah. I don't think that many also Israelis actually read the Torah, not to mention Palestinians. And I think it's the Torah and all the stories and values and regarding the good and the bad, it happened here. This land, whether also, of course, Islam has connections here, and Christianity and many, many cultures, but the Torah Israel, basically, which is the DNA of the Jewish people, if it's not going to be part of this process, I guarantee that there's not going to be a solution. And it's not in a way that's going to push it and, to force people to become Jews or something like that. No, I think it can be very inclusive. And I think, again, without it, it's not going to be a real and genuine solution. And now, if I may, I want to touch, the steps how to get there, okay? Because this is what's important.
Can I just ask a few more questions about the end result? Because I think we could provide the viewers just a little bit more clarity. And then, how we get there obviously is extremely important. So many Israelis have a concern about a one-state solution due to a demographic issue. Many Israelis want Israel to remain a Jewish state. So there's a few ways you remain a Jewish state: through a two-state solution, through a one-state solution, but where Palestinians don't have voting rights, and that is de facto apartheid, or a more clever solution like what you just explained, which is a one-state solution where everybody gets voting rights if they do some kind of national service. What's interesting about what you're saying is the people who generally support one-state solution with everybody getting voting rights are like people on the far left of Israeli politics. So it's interesting.
Everyone with voting rights without any conditions, yeah.
Right. So
they don't think about Jewish identity of the state. Sorry that I got you.
Yeah. So that's kind of what I want to touch on. What do you say to the people who want Israel to be a Jewish state, and how do you ensure that it remains a Jewish state, under this plan?
Well, first and foremost, what defines a Jewish state as a Jewish state? Let's say before, first and foremost, what defines a Jewish state? Israel of today is not yet a Jewish state. It's like, how you say golem? It's like a cocoon that hasn't been a flower, butterfly yet, the way I see it. It's a very Western, very based on Western model of democracy that I'm not against, but it's still not a Jewish state. A Western democracy or European model with Jewish decorations, but it's not yet a Jewish state. And I think that the only model that the Jewish state can really be based on is based on what was 3,000 years ago. But again, with no regression to go back, the kingdom of Israel, basically. But, what's important about the Jewish state is not, of course, the Jewish majority is important, but it's not the most important, because what's important is the law, is the political system that also can include the other within that as equals. And, when people speak about, the demographics, okay, yes, it's important, but to some extent, it's not the most important. And I will explain also a value that has in the book of Samuel 2, Samuel Shmuel Bet, that there was a story that King David united the kingdom of Israel and Judea, and he went to count how much residents live in each and every one of the tribal cantons, basically. The people of Israel were divided into tribes, okay? So we went to count how many people are in each tribe. And what God did, God punished them. He said to him, now you choose a punishment, either famine, hunger, a war, or a plague. And basically it means that it's not about how many people really live or what's the number. It's important the law. It's important also that we understand that we are under Hashem, that we are under something bigger than us.
So,
But even, now let me get another thing.
sure.
Now in the state of Israel, there are 7 million Jews, 2 million non-Jews, and 9 million totally. Okay, so even if Israel will absorb, let's say, 2.5 million Palestinians into the state of Israel, that's going to be 7 million Jews and let's say almost 4 million non-Jews, something like that. 4 million, 4 million and a half. It's still going to be Jewish majority, but it's going to be under a federation that's also going to regulate. The thing about voting, like the demography will not be as as a threat as it is now. You know what I mean? Also with full Israeli sovereignty, of course. I'm not saying that, and I don't think that this thing will happen overnight.
That doesn't include Gaza, correct?
Well, that's what I say to everyone that asks me about Gaza. As long as a Jew cannot live in Gaza, as long as regular Palestinians cannot talk with Israelis in freedom, and as long as Hamas is controlling Gaza and being a dictatorship the way it is, of course, Gaza is going to be out of the picture. Once this issue is going to be resolved, let's talk.
So let's first take care of peace between Israelis and West Bank Palestinians, and then we'll tackle the issue with Gaza next.
But even before, and this is why I want to talk about the steps in order to get there, we need also to make inner unification between inside the Israeli society and inner unification inside the Palestinian society. So the thing about steps, and basically what the home does, we work within practical steps like I described in the beginning. That's freedom of thinking, which is the meetings where we discuss about various ideas, we meet, we get to know people from different places. Step 2 is the cleanups, to create the connection between people and do something practical and get more people on board. And also it's good for the land, it's good for the health, some exercise. Step 3 is basically freedom of expression, to bring people to the stage in public, not like now, that many people are afraid to really say what they say in closed doors. And, I've seen a lot of times when people said A above the table, but said B under the table, and I can understand because they get into interrogations and stuff like that. So step number 4 should be to do, let's say, projects for the environment, or do environmental project that gonna, more increase the cooperation also between maybe the PA and Israel and the communities. And step 5 is peace at home, basically. Do work innerly inside the Israeli society, inside the Palestinian society, and create the process of inner unification. Step 6, basically, it's the right to choose, because any political idea of an end game that we are speaking about right now cannot be legitimate without people voting for it in a referendum in both the Israeli and the Palestinian society. Correct or not? I mean, for that to pass on, there must be a step of freedom of choice to choose this thing, and also to flourish legitimate leadership. Elections in Israel, what we have, too much in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And also elections in the Palestinian society, to have legitimate, genuine leaders that really represent the people and not the dictatorship that there is right now. And step number 7 is basically diplomacy. I don't believe that, without full recognition from all the Arab and Islamic states in the state of Israel and the Palestinians within the state of Israel, there's going to be peace, or there's going to be Israeli acceptance or Jewish acceptance for such a, big idea. Because, we are, as Jews, we are 7 million in a region of about 400 million Arabs, right? So we need also to feel secure that, to normalize the connections also between hostile countries, by the way, including Iran. I mean, without the Iranians, or, not to mention the Saudis that are already in normalization with us, why would we go to something like that while we still have enemies outside? It must be a condition, in my opinion, to get this thing further in a, legitimate way. And step number 8 should be political trust building measures. That's going to be, for example, Israel takes down the wall brick by brick. And on the other hand, the Palestinians finish all the incitements in the mosques and in the media, and no more violence against Israel or even the IDF. And Israel, let's say, is a, political trust building measures, build a monument to memorize the victims of, let's say, either Dir Yassin or, the massacre in Lid. Something also to recognize the history. And in the other hand, the Palestinians build synagogues in the big cities to welcome also Jews inside big Palestinian cities. Because in the end of the day, if we talk about real one-state solution, everyone must live in the big cities. And it's also regarding the laws and values from the Torah. I mean, do you see a situation that we're going to have genuine peace here?
Wait, just to make sure I understood, everyone must live in the big cities, or everyone must have the option to, if they wish?
The option. I mean, a Palestinian, in the, let's say in the outcome, in the scenario of the end game of Israeli sovereignty, that everyone live within one system. Basically, if a Palestinian from, let's say, Adar refugee camp want to live in Yafo or Haifa or Jerusalem, of course, he must have the right to do so, but only if a Jew will be able to live also in Bethlehem and Nablus and Jenin and Ramallah. Make sense? So in this step also should be, measures regarding Gaza, which is very, very, it's very early even to talk about it. And basically, let's give people the ability to think outside of the box, not only about the outcome, but also how to get there in a rational way. Because, and there's going to be also more problems and more things that I haven't mentioned yet that will arise, and it's all work in progress, basically. It must be remain to discussion, and not in a dogmatic way like peace now, let's say two-state solution 40 years ago, and we see now the results. It must be, with the realization that the future is open eventually. We don't know what's going to be in the next 5 minutes, let alone what's going to be in 1 year.
That is a step. Let me know when you're done with the steps, because I do have a few questions. I just want to give you the time to run through them.
Basically, the step number 9, which is restoration of Israeli sovereignty and including Palestinians in Israel as citizens or residents, and basically a model based on combination between, federalism of the Arab federalism, like Dr. Mordechai Kehatl says, like his idea of emirates that's going to be in the big Palestinian cities, and a combination of cantons, like the Swiss model, like a very good friend of mine, Aryeh Hess, also mentioned that it's going to be, like Tel Aviv is going to be secular canton, Gush Etzion will be religious canton. They're going to have different sets of civil laws that's going to be different from canton to canton in the way that they're going to fit to the population, that, the different and genuine and unique population that live in different cantons, and combine this with laws and values from the Torah that also says that one constitution should be to you and the other that live among you. And basically, the idea of absorbing the other in the system that's going to be the state of Israel. And again, I mean, we need to think about ideas that break the paradigm that also going to fit the identities of people living here. And that's basically in a nutshell.
Cool. Well, thank you for sharing. Where can people find this 9-step plan?
It's actually 10-step plan.
I thought you finished on 9. I remember being 10, but I thought you just pulled out a step. My apologies.
Step number 10, basically, it's the step that initiates, what we talk about in theory, in my opinion. It should be the Temple Mount stance. And they can find it basically in the website of the home. And by the way, now in the home, we're going to do reevaluation. And probably, we're not going to promote all of this 10 steps now because, again, now there's probably going to be a focus on different things. But in the end of the day, what I mentioned in the 10 steps, it's going to arise eventually to the discussion. Now what we're going to do in the home, we're going to focus on is full restoration of Israeli sovereignty in Area C. We're going to focus on the Emirate plan of Dr. Kehatl. And we're going to focus on providing Palestinians with residency or citizenship with a limited place in the Palestinian villages and generate this change of dynamics in order to promote the next steps, to do things on the ground in a way that will not be so big like I just described. And I know that I'm a big dreamer, whatever. But I think that you need to visualize a dream, a vision, if you want to get to there. And eventually it's on the will of God, or will of Hashem, want to get there in the future.
How can people contribute or join this process if they'd like to?
They basically make a like on our Facebook page. I mean, what happens now is that I don't have time to manage everything. I don't even have in the home website even a PayPal account because I don't have time even to handle these things, So
yeah.
You can contact me personally, and I'll be happy to talk, and I'll be happy to cooperate and see how we can do things together.
Great. So yeah, you guys heard. If anybody is interested, reach out to the home on Facebook or reach out to Inon and see how you can participate. We are getting some nice audience questions, so we'll get to it soon. I do have a few more questions. I'd like a little bit more clarity about the demographic issue. You mentioned that the demographic issue is not an issue because there will be some kind of laws in place that regardless of who the majority is, it will still maintain its Jewish character of sorts. Is that correct?
Sure.
So what is that Jewish character? What does that mean, Jewish law?
Jewish law basically is laws from the Torah that gotta be translated to our time, and also values from Jewish political system, which is the Kingdom of Israel, that gotta be translated again to our era. For example, federalism. The Kingdom of Israel was a conglomerate of different cantons, different tribes that live under the same state, the same kingdom. And the tribe of Judea has the role of leading it, of being the legislator. And for example, one law should be for the Jews and the non-Jews. That's written in the Torah. I didn't, invent that. And for example,
but sorry,
there's also going to be another thing, and this is another very important issue that we didn't touch. It's the origin of the Palestinian people. And I know for a fact that there are many Palestinians that have Jewish descendants, Jewish origins. And I don't think that they should, be converted to Judaism again or something like that. I think that they should be included in the same peoplehood, in the same collective as equals, and come back to their origins also as well as Muslims or Christians. And I think it's going to be a beautiful thing once we're going to have, that the people of Israel will not be only the Jewish people, but also people that have Jewish roots and come back to their origin.
So I'm with you on that last part, but again, the Jewish character, how do we decide what parts of Judaism we want to be law? So, there are many beautiful aspects of the Torah, but there's also some very archaic beliefs there when it comes to, homosexuals or women or anybody who speaks bad about the religion should be sentenced to death according to the Torah. So there's so much in the Torah that we do not want to adopt into law. I mean, that would make Israel a theocracy. So again, any Jewish value, I actually believe today can be considered a humanist value. And I have a feeling that that approaching it that way might be easier to convince people, because the second you say Jewish value, how does anybody know what part of Judaism you're talking about? And many Muslims will be like, why do I want to live under Jewish value? But if we make the pitch with humanism about all humans and humans having intrinsic value and intrinsic rights, then I think that it's much more clear what that means, and it's not like a red flag for many people.
But I think also it's very solvable in a way that the federal system, each canton or each emirate have their own characteristics, regarding what fits the people that live there. So, for example, not that I support it or not that I preach for it. For example, gay parades will be, natural and legal and regulated in Tel Aviv or in Gush Dan. But in Gush Etzion or Jerusalem, it probably will not be. For example, okay? Not that I'm against gay rights. I think gays should be equal under the law, of course. But I think that, in different regions, there's going to be different cultures and different characters. For example, I don't think there's going to be a gay parade ever in Bethlehem or Hebron, for example. What fits the place. But there's not going to be stoning of gays or stoning of people that light fire in Shabbat.
Right. So
because we're translating values from, let's say, 300 or 2,500 years to our time, and not to regress, because we cannot regress. I mean, once we have the information revolution, we cannot go back, no matter what anyone will say. I mean, because people already know they have so much knowledge. And by the way, I think that there's the information revolution have a very big role in Be'ezrat Hashem, Lord willing, bringing peace to our land, because it's also said in the book of Isaiah, thou shalt not desecrate or destroy my holy mountain, because the knowledge of the Lord will be so widespread from sea to sea. And my translation for this verse is that, the internet, knowledge from sea to sea. That wasn't 2,500 years ago when this verse was written. And actually, it was not even 20 years ago. That everyone now has in their own palm of their hand. They have all of the knowledge in the world, something that human beings didn't have ever in humanity.
So I agree for the most part that the world is going in a positive direction when it comes for social issues, but there have been some cases of countries that have regressed when it comes to social issues. I don't say that there's any rule that says we can't regress on social issues, especially when Israel's fastest growing populations are actually not progressive when it comes to social issues. So, me as a liberal secular Jew, I have certain wants, and to me, it's not clear that that certain rights will be protected under Jewish law. But if it's under a humanist law that grants very specific rights, it's very clear the rights that individuals have. It seems like that's a much better approach. I'm still not fully understanding what the Jewish law, where that comes into place. Sure, we've been.
Something I also don't understand completely myself. I just suggest some kind of a guidelines, and it's going to be open for inclusive discussion with Palestinians. That's the idea. I'm not going to say now what's going to be the final outcome because it's not in my hands. I can only say a direction and let the snowball go.
Okay. Well, first of all, I think it's respectable that you acknowledge that you don't have all the answers. I think one thing many leaders and politicians, they need to pretend like they know everything, so they just lie or bullshit. So I think it's commendable that you could acknowledge that there's obviously still consensus that needs to be built, and obviously I'd be happy to help contribute to that consensus. I guess that's why we're having this conversation. We're getting some interesting audience questions. So first of all, I want to tell the audience, thank you for keeping the conversation respectful. It's very rare to see this in dialogue regarding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I think we're really doing something new here. We're not fighting, we're speaking, and so thank you to everybody contributing. So we have Marwan. Marwan asked a great question. He said, Inon, would you consider changing the name of Israel to something else? Because many Palestinians, because of just the deep-rooted trauma that is as a result of this conflict, would not want to live under Israel, in Israel. It's just, there's just too much baggage with the state of Israel. Would you consider a new name?
I can ask the same question to Marwan. Thank you for the question. Would you consider changing the name Palestine into Israel? I mean,
But he didn't say, would you consider Palestine? He's actually suggesting a third name that's not Israel or Palestine. Because you're right, Israelis won't agree to Palestine.
Personally, I would not agree, personally. I mean, but I don't have a problem that Palestinian will call all of the land as Palestine, and Jews will call the land Israel. But the state, in my opinion, gonna be remaining Israel. We can debate about that. It's all good. We can call it Kukuwawa if you want, but
I like Kukuwawa.
Kukuwawa, okay, Kukuwawa then.
We did get some nice recommendations.
But if let me just say this to Marwan: if the name is going to be the only obstacle, then we're in a good place.
I agree. May those be our concerns. May we agree on everything but the name.
May these will be our problems.
Yeah.
Because what's important is the law, human rights, and political opportunities. Basically.
Right. So Phil Saunders recommend.
I must also ask a question. I mean, trying to defend also, the narrative and the culture I'm coming from as a Jew. I mean, there's almost 200 states in the world, and there are about 50 Muslim countries. Why would not be one Jewish state? Just one tiny. That, in my identity, I feel as a representative of a descendant of Jews from 3,000, but been in exile for 2,000 years, and they prayed for what I'm living. Basically, I believe that I don't have the right, or any Jew have the right to give up on what Jews were praying for during 2,000 years. So it's also about justice.
I'd like to answer that. I just want to tell you, we got a recommendation from Phil that we call it State of Abraham. I think that's clever. And then Marwan also recommended we call it the State of Jerusalem, which is also interesting because that still connects to our history. Are you cool with either of them?
If I'm cool with?
Are you cool with State of Abraham or State of Jerusalem?
Me personally, no.
Okay, fine.
Israel reflects, what should be.
I just want to, about what you said, Muslims have 50 countries. Why can't we have one? I think that's a good point. But Palestinians have close to nothing to do with those 50 countries. So it's not a convincing argument to Palestinians. They're like, okay, Muslims have 15 countries. I have none. So I don't think that's a convincing argument. I think if we're going to go with the two-state solution, then it makes more sense to say, yeah, why can't we have a Jewish state? But if the entire land remains Israel and remains a Jewish state, you now need to convince around 3 million people to live under a Jewish state. So it seems to me like an uphill battle. I know you've spoken to many Palestinians that are cool with it. I'm just sharing with you what I think may be a challenge here.
Let me say also another thing, and I want to be rational and also realistic. We need to convince this idea, first and foremost, the Israeli people, whether Jewish or non-Jewish, because we cannot make this discussion in a real way in the Palestinian society. That's number one. So I address, number one, the Israeli society in a practical way. So the name is going to remain Israel, because also that's what it is now. Number two, and I'm going to be again rational and realistic, the state of Israel, and we have the power, basically. So because we have the power, we need to be the ones that initiate, and it's kind of a trade-off. So if you convince me otherwise, I will maybe think otherwise, but the name is not the most important thing. And I think, again, that if this is going to be the only problem, then we don't really have a problem, because if it's semantics, it's not really the problem.
I agree that if we get to the point where the only thing holding up an agreement is the name, then we should find a way to solve it. It would be very sad for a peace agreement to fail just because of that. That being said, it might be easier to convince more Palestinians of the solution if there's, if there is a name. But as you said, Palestinians can call it Palestine, Israelis can call it Israel. It would be interesting to see how Palestinians feel about this, and I think we should start speaking to more Palestinians. For the viewers who are unfamiliar a little bit about my views, I'm more agnostic when it comes to solutions. I would support any solution that the majority of both sides agree to, that provides security, liberty, and the possibility for prosperity for both nations. If we can meet those criteria, then I would support it. So, I'm not against the Inon solution. I think there's certain challenges there, but if I see it solves, it checks all the boxes that I need checked, then I would definitely be on board. That being said, the two-state solution in many ways checks those boxes as well. So that's kind of, where I come from when it comes to this.
But that's what is important more than the solution is the path towards the solution. We cannot have a genuine discussion. A genuine discussion is going to have genuine Palestinians going to also be part of the discussion in a public way. And once there's dictatorship, once there is no freedom of speech, and once Palestinians getting interrogated for speaking with Jewish people like me, and by the way, they don't agree with me about everything, for sure. But if there's not going to be the freedom of thinking of people to get together from different places and to actually think together, I guarantee there's not going to be any solution, not even the two states. And I don't think also that I will be happy to live in under a dictatorship that doesn't allow me to speak about, my mind. I don't understand people from the Israeli peace organizations that support the Palestinian state, but yet again speak about democracy. It doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't add up. And maybe there could be a Palestinian state, maybe. If indeed it was, combined from people that protect human rights and protect democracy and open for, recognize the Jewish neighbors like we supposed to. And by the way, not all of the Israelis and Jews recognize Palestinians. That's also, of course. But
I mean, I would even go further and say the majority of Israelis are offended by the term Palestine.
It depends, yeah, but also the majority of Palestinians are offended by the term Israel.
For sure, it's part of the reality. Yeah,
right.
These are trigger words.
Right, but also again, if we speak about spirituality, which is also a very important factor. In Islam and in Judaism, which is a lot of similarities, we say "Kulo min Allah" or "Hakol milemala." You know what it means? It's like everything is from God. So if everything is from God, then the Jewish people came back. It's God's will, and also the Palestinian people remain in this land. Same thing. It's God's will. So if we go against either people, it's like we go against God. Therefore, we don't have yet peace. Because I really believe, and also as a secular Jew, I don't keep Shabbat, and maybe I don't eat pork anymore, but
Yeah, I think, this is an area of disagreement between you and I that we probably just won't find common ground on. But I don't really look at things in those terms.
That's cool, but I also think that most of the people living between the river and the sea, and especially in the Palestinian society, are people that believe in God, believe in Allah. So you have to bring also God to the peace process in a way. I mean, not forcing anyone to believe, because you cannot force someone to believe in something. You know.
What do you just back to I'm seeing the chat. People are getting more lively in the chat, so that excites me. People are asking about. Well, there's one question about right of return for Palestinians.
I know that this question will arise. I knew it, of course, and it's something that it's a hard issue that must be challenged for sure.
Mm-hmm. What do you think?
I think about the right of return as follows. I think that the right of return for Palestinians is also right of return for Jews. So I look at it in this way, okay? First, the right of return for Palestinians to all of the land where they came from. I'm with that, to live in one state, basically a Palestinian from Ida camp will go back to live in Yafo or his village, or I don't know, or big cities, whatever. Only if a Jew can also have the right to return to live in Bethlehem and Ramallah and Nablus. It will not happen beforehand. And also look, first and inner right of return. That's first and foremost. That's clear, because anyway, once we're gonna be one state, then everyone will be able to travel around everywhere and live basically in the big cities. But also we have the right of return to return or restore our sovereignty that was taken away from us, by the way, not from the Palestinians or Arabs, but from the Romans. It's also a justice that the Palestinians need to recognize for us, in my opinion, not that they caused it. And talking about outside right of return, I don't really know, it's a big issue, but I think that we must focus first inside the land. And after the peace ceremony in Temple Mount, maybe also putting in practice the right of return for Palestinians outside will be possible. That's my opinion.
Okay. I think that so we're finding points where I see uphill battles to convince Palestinians, and I think this is a challenging one to convince Israelis. Right of return. Again, these are the things I'm talking about now. The two-state solution seems to be a better solution for. I know that the two-state solution has its own set of challenges, but it's not clear what. No, I would actually say the solution you're proposing. I'm not saying it can't work, and I'm not saying it can't be just. That's not what I think. I think that getting a consensus to agree to it, if you can pull that off, you deserve all the credit in the world. It seems like there's just so much that needs to be done.
That's why I'm focusing on the dynamics rather than the outcome, because again, the outcome is not my hands. Who am I to speak about what's going to be in the end? That's in the hands of Hashem. I can try and make the dynamics to bring people with disagreement to the same table in public, to a respectful discussion, also believing and acknowledging that we have a joint future here. By the way, I see some people in the comments, I don't read them, but I will not mention names. But some people that have so much hate in them that cannot be even, to have the discussion in a mature way. So it's all good. You can attack. I see you. But it's all good. I have
I would say, the rarity of civil discourse. Is rarity a word? I think it is. If it's not, I'm going to use it. The rarity of civil discourse regarding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, a lot of it has to do with the amount of pain that this conflict causes people, right? If you've been victimized, traumatized by a conflict, it then becomes very hard to sit and have a civil conversation. So, I'm always advocating for it, but, as you and I are doing right now, but I think it's easy to understand where a lot of this anger comes from.
Sure. There must be recognition on both sides, and it's not. Look, I totally understand the Palestinians suffer much more than us. That's a no-brainer. But I think that if we will remain to be stuck in the victim mentality, we will not progress anywhere, guaranteed. Because people that remain in the victim mentality, they basically live in the past. They cannot advance. They cannot speak about or even think about the future because they're stuck in the past. And definitely, the past is bitter, especially for Palestinians. That's for sure. But I'm trying to look also from my point of view as a Jew. I mean, you know, we had a lot of traumas during history in the last century, in the 20th century. We had the pogroms, we had the Holocaust, we had, also by the way, regarding Hebron, the massacre in Hebron, nobody almost mentioned that. And 1929, for example, and the Holocaust, of course. But we advanced. I mean, and look now at the state of Israel. It's successful, it's flourishing, it's stable. It's not perfect, that's for sure. But I believe that you can actually see Arabs or Palestinians of 48 being part of Israel. And again, it's not perfect, but the potential is in the state of Israel, and it can be flourish much even more. Therefore, I do not believe that the state of Israel right now is actually really Jewish, but it has to evolve and add more elements to be upgraded to something that it's supposed to be and include the others. That's what I believe, and people can disagree with me, and it's all good. But if you have a better solution, yalla, let's hear it.
I definitely think Israel needs to continue to upgrade and evolve, but I don't see it becoming more Jewish as a solution for that. I see it becoming more humanist.
By the way, Judaism, very important to us. Only that I cut you, but we Jews, we cut each other all the time. So
for sure,
Judaism, in its essence, in its core, it's not a religion. It's a nation. It's a tribe. It's a tribal identity. I mean, Judaism, as we have right now, it's kind of a box that the sages 2,000 years ago, when we went to exile, gave to the Jewish people that went into exile. By the way, these Jewish people were about, let's say, like 10% of the Jews living in, back then Roman Provincia Palestina. And basically, the sages gave this box to the Jewish people to exile, so they will preserve. So we will preserve our identity. And now we came back to our land, and now this box is open. But another thing is that 90% of the Jews that weren't going to exile, who are they today? They probably went into either, converted to Christianity or converted to Islam mainly from economical reasons. And nowadays they are Palestinians. Some of them, I don't know exactly the number, but I think it's also part of the story that must be also part of the discussion regarding our joint future. And I'm not saying to kick out anyone out, Unlike, some people that I think in your comments that think that the Jews should go back to where they came from and still with the BDS mentality. It's okay. I mean, this mosquito can buzz a lot of the time, but it's still a mosquito, and the mosquito get eventually.
Look, to clarify for for anyone who's unsure, your solution involves equal rights for all citizens of the land. Both Jews and Palestinians have the right to be full citizens.
For sure.
No one needs to be removed from their homes.
So it can be similar to both Jews and Palestinians. Again, a Haredi Jew that doesn't go to the army, a lefty Jew that doesn't go to the army, no vote, the hillbillies that go against the army, they should not have the right to vote, in my opinion. It's very simple.
What if you don't go for medical reasons?
Well, that's something different, of course. That depends. I mean, but if someone is
exceptions, okay, just making sure. A few more questions we're getting. I think I know the answer to this, but I want the audience to. I want you to have the opportunity to respond. Phil asked, and I think he makes a good point. How can we ensure that Palestinians maintain their own unique identity? Will they be able to have their own flags, their own national anthem? How do you think we approach that?
Me personally, I don't have problems with flags. I mean, different cantons or different emirates will have, if they want, the Palestinian flag and the Emirate flag or something like that. But I think that if they want to be part of Israel, part of one state, it must be also one flag. It doesn't have to be only one flag; it could be a couple of them. But again, I mean, for me, this question is not serious because flag in the end of the day is just a rug with it's a decoration.
I get what you're saying, but I think in order to pitch this idea and get people to agree, like it really needs to speak to them. So national identity, I think, is important. These are what we're doing now is we're seeing like real time questions that people have about this plan. So I think this should give you some insight as to what many Israelis and Palestinians would say. So it seems like national identity, again, it might not be a core tenet of this plan, but it seems that it will need to be an important part if we're going to get people to agree to it.
But I think it's a question that's going to be solved once there's going to be changes on the ground in the dynamics again. And the fact that I cannot see any one Israeli flag in one piece of demonstration in, let's say, Ramallah, but you can see a Palestinian flag in Tel Aviv, that says it all, in my opinion.
So yeah,
if you really want to live together and be equal, we need to also have the same conditions or the same hold the same standards to each other.
And I know it seems like we're going in a different direction, but I actually want to get into like the fundamentals of why you think this is the best solution. Why not a two-state solution with like a confederacy with open borders where all Palestinians can travel freely in Israel and all Israelis can travel freely in Palestine? What's the issue with that?
Like two states, one homeland.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, I will answer it in 3 levels. One, this solution basically is out there with a movement, with funding, with media, with influence for I think about 8 or 9 years. It's still nothing. It's basically another manufacturing, another version of the two-state solution. Number 2, if there was a Palestinian leadership that was also true to the values of the two states, one homeland, we would see now basically, we would not see also in the PA resistance to the Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria. Now we see basically in the narrative that the Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria or the settlements are illegal. So again, and the third thing, I think that me as a Jew, I don't have a right to give up on any inch of the land to other sovereignty, which is not Jewish or Israeli. This is the way I see it. I see it in a way that not exclude Palestinians, but include. But if people want to focus on another sovereignty which is not Israeli, I personally don't support it. There are many organizations that do. Go ahead, good luck, but I don't think that it will get anywhere.
So I hear you.
By the way, the Palestinian state or the future Palestinian state right now, it's not a democracy, it's a dictatorship, and it doesn't really matter what's the situation between Israel and the PA. I mean, if you don't give your own people the freedom to elect your leader, it doesn't matter about Israel right now. Forget about, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but a leader or a dictator that was not elected by his own people for more than 50 years, in a system that don't give freedom of speech, that's the state the Palestinians dream about.
So I think whatever the state Palestinians dream about, that is their destiny. That is their choice. It's not clear that our Western democracy is what the Palestinians would want or what would be best for them. Different cultures have the right to self-determine in different ways. But about the 3 points. So,
and I agree. And therefore, the idea of federalism, combining Emirates, which is Arab federalism, and cantons, which is Western federalism, combined also with laws and values from the Torah translated to our times, that's what I think should be the direction.
Okay, I hear you. I just want to touch on your 3 points. So the first one is, you said that they've been trying and haven't gotten much traction. I think that I don't know if that's such a strong point, because we're dealing with a very complex conflict that's been ongoing for over 100 years now. Whatever solution that we find will not be easy, and it's likely going to be one that took many years to work and build up. And it's not, if we could list the reasons why these solutions aren't getting implemented, I don't think the answer you will find is that people don't like it. It's that there's just too many things we need to solve beforehand. A partner for peace, good leadership. There's just so much. So I don't know if it's the plan that's bad. I think that we don't have the conditions ready to implement any plan.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
That's why the focus is more on the path rather than the solution. You know what I mean? But the path, like you said, it's so difficult also. Man, just sit down in, public space, without covering faces of people. For me to make pictures from, home meetings and stuff like that, it's like to work with like with a scalpel, like, it's like so complicated, even simple things.
Yeah. I want to touch on, so I still want to, hit all the points. So the first one we spoke about. The second point was settlers living. You don't want settlements to be considered illegal, but what if we had a confederacy where Jews can have neighborhoods in Palestine? So that would solve that technically. The third point, and this is really the most important one that you said, that you won't agree to any solution where the land won't remain whole and Jewish. And I hear you and I feel you. I know many Israelis also feel the same way. And on an emotional level, I get it. It resonates with me. I'm not able to turn that emotional feeling into a rational explanation. When I'm not able to do that, for me, that's a sign that I should quit. It's a sign that that emotion isn't good enough if it can't translate into like a rational explanation. That's how I live life. And I'll tell you why it makes it an uphill battle, because if the basis for why something needs to be is your own emotional feeling, that is not, the Palestinians will never agree to that. If we tell them it needs to remain Israel because it needs to be, they'll be like, okay, well, I feel like it needs to be Palestine. So I would say, let's try to rationalize this idea. And it seems like the only way that we can pitch this to other people.
Basically, my answer is, why do we have to rationalize and agree to the right of return? Why do we have to, give up on something that our forefathers were praying for? Like Palestinians want to return to Yafo and Haifa and Jerusalem. That's my question. Why it's only us that need to be compromising on things that I don't believe even in our generation to give up on. And I think it's a very important discussion. And again, simply because we have, wrongdoings on both sides and, the bitter history and all that. And the fact that the Palestinians now are much weaker than the Israelis, why should I then, again, apologize about the place I come from? But again, I'm not there. I don't want to take anyone away. I want to include, but that's just me. What can I say? And I know it's a very difficult thing. But,
yeah. So what you're saying is that you don't even necessarily need to make the rational plea. You could just.
It's not rational. By the way, it's not rational. I mean, the fact that I believe that I have the right, zchut avot, like the right of forefathers and foremothers, on a land that was given to my people, my tribe, 3,500 years ago, that's not rational. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, also not rational is also that, the recreation of the state of Israel, if you would ask someone, let's say 200 or 100 years ago, if it will happen, it would say no way, but it happened.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't put that in the category of not rational. I get what you're saying. The plan for Israel to exist 100 years ago seemed very unlikely. It seemed ambitious, but the conversation of rational or not, it's that's the conversation of where does this idea come from. So Zionism was a rational concept in the sense we're persecuted in Europe. We're getting murdered. We need a land where we can be safe. That's like a rational element to it. People who then say, that's our land because God said so, that's either emotional or just deep belief. And it's harder to convince other people of that unless they believe in the same God or connecting to the same emotional plea. But that's much harder with populations that are not our own.
Right, but we can say in the same time that, regarding Islam or the fact that Muhammad, flying to heavens on a steed from, the Temple Mount, we can say the same thing. But I can respect someone that have different belief than me. I don't, dispute that. So why is it that when we say something, which I agree, it's not based on rationality, it's based on spirituality, it's based on belief. It's something that is deep in the soul. Why do we need to compromise about that as Jewish people, while the others that have similar beliefs that doesn't based on rational things with, let's say, solid proofs or something like that? You know what I mean? And I'm not judging Islam. I think Islam is a religion that is sent from Hashem, from God. I mean, otherwise, if, like 1,400 years, Prophet Muhammad, is legitimized, prophet by Hashem, but not for our people, but for most of the world, basically, And again, I mean, we need to think about not only humanity. And Adar, I know you're much more connected to your humane side, and I love that, by the way, and I think you do it in a very balanced way. But it's not only about humanity; it's about humanity. It's about nationalism. It's about nationality. It's about rationality, and it's also about spirituality. That's what makes human beings human beings. It's about emotion. It's about brain. It's about spirit. If we will not find the balance between these three and combine it into one idea, we will not solve the conflict anyway. You know what I mean? And yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of those, values, I'd say I'm with you on, I'm with you on that. I mean, nationalism, nationality, those probably come last in the list. I don't think those are essential to humans being happy. We can evolve past the concept of a nation state. I do not think we can evolve past the concept of rationality or humanism, right? One is a value system, the other is how we navigate in this complex world. I would say those two tenets speak to me much more than nationalism. And let me add spirituality. I view spirituality not as anything metaphysical, but the human's quest for transcendence and personal growth. So spirituality, rationality, humanism, I'm on board with those. Nationality, I see it as was essential in the past. Nations, grouped together either for protection or to achieve certain common goals. But I don't think it is an innate part of humans' existence that we need a nation state. I think we could evolve past it. Again, this is just a difference in values. I don't expect to convince you, but I think it's good that people see these different value systems in somewhat of a respectful clash.
But you know what? Regardless of what's going to be the outcome, what's going to be the final result, I don't say final solution. It's a very bad thing to say. But regardless what's going to be the final outcome, I mean, I believe that the fact that Jews are here and Palestinians are here, it's from Hashem and it has added value with spirituality. And I think that our unification, whatever gonna be, whether it's gonna be one state name, Palestine or Israel. Okay, now I'm gonna go now away from my Jewish identity. But the solution is gonna be here. It has the potential to inspire humanity and also to fix a lot of problems of a lot of failed states in our region, in the Middle East. And if we will not, get away from our egos and our victim mentality and stuff like that, we will not get into the solution, into the outcome, and we will miss the opportunity of our potential to influence and inspire humanity, and especially this region, because I think that really our unification is something that has a lot of meaning, much more than a political solution. It's much more than that. And therefore, you know what? I am willing to give up on my, political idea and focus on the path. If the solution is going to be combining people that are, let's say, from Hamas, and also people from Kehatl and people from the Jewish community of Hebron, sitting together and let them talk. And I will not say anything regarding politics, okay? But again, we need to bring them in. And regarding where we're gonna get, what's gonna be the final outcome, it will not come without the process of inclusivity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All these people, by the way, all the people from BDS that I know some of them from the comments, they put like a big, big, big own goal for their own cause by boycotting, speaking with the other that doesn't agree with them. First, it's not democratic. Second, who are you gonna speak with? You're gonna speak with your tiny echo chamber, and you think you're gonna change? I mean, of course, you can shout for 20 years like you do now, not you now, of course, but you will remain stuck as a cult, and But again, a mosquito is a mosquito, and a mosquito eventually.
That's what you consider BDS.
Basically, yeah, a mosquito with a megaphone.
I feel you. I could actually make a pretty good case for boycotting, but I don't think BDS is taking an approach that's effective. But I think I don't think people want us to get into that now.
The fact that I mentioned BDS, I kind of made it big.
No, for sure. What do you think the next practical step is? What can we do right when this live stream is done? What can we do?
What we do in the home for the last 5 years. Let's make meetings. Let's make more cleanups in different areas. Let's put it in the media. Let's do these discussions without need to blur people's faces. But again, once we have to blur people's faces, once people are not free to speak in public, it will not flourish. You know what I mean? We need to make an organized platform to make normalization what the BDS cannot even, say. But we must normalize not the Israeli military rule, but we need to normalize connections between the communities. Not only Tel Aviv and Ramallah, and definitely not Jews living in New York and their counterparts from the BDS, Palestinians from Chicago. We need to focus here. This is the main point. So if we will not normalize the connections, the relations between different hostile communities in the heart of the conflict, I guarantee nothing will change. Guarantee. And we also need to do it without foreign interference, without foreign powers or foreign stakeholders that basically manipulate our conflict and take advantage of it. And as like the courtesy either of the US or the Europeans, it doesn't contribute for us to really flourish something with healthy relationship that must flourish from here without the foreign interference. And I say basically to the Americans, I want to be your ally, but I don't want to be under your courtesy. Mm-hmm. Regarding the relationship with Palestinians. So either Americans or let's say, which is very pro-Israeli, or Europeans, which is kind of an anti in a way, stay out. Let us figure out what to do and let the dynamic flourish in a natural way between us without you try to be or tell us what's good for us.
Yeah, I mean, can you see a situation where help from the international community, can be a positive thing?
No, actually, no. I think that once that the more they will stay out and let us really handle our business, the better. And by the way, the home, I refuse to get foreign money from foreign governments, from foreign bodies, and they also will not contribute because basically I'm not allowing that the home is going to be a tool of someone from the outside. That's period. Not going to change. And I don't care even if Donald Trump will suggest to give $1 billion for the home. Here, I'm on tape. $1 billion for the home, even 1 million, I will not take
We
it.
have you on record. You will not take money from a foreign entity for the home.
It's like avodah zarah. It's like how you say it in English. You know, avodah zarah, like idol worshiping in a way.
Yeah. Okay. So,
I think also another important point. Peace is not about something material. Of course, when we need to be rational, we need to combine material with, vision, but peace is not focusing about funds. Look at the peace industry with the millions, no achievements. And also, I think peace should be about modesty. And it's supposed to be something that comes from people and not being forced on people and not to buy people. You know what I mean? And I think also regarding the home, eventually the home need to be dismantled as an organization because if we will think about when the home will be dismantled, that's when peace is going to come, Be'ezrat Hashem. That it's not going to be needed. Not going to be a need for peace organizations because there's going to be, a last.
Yeah. Guys, we're going to wrap it up soon. So ask any questions you want now. I do see there is a little bit of fighting. I do want to respond to one of the claims made here. I won't say their name just because I don't know if they want me to, but I'm going to read it. It says, and I'm doing this because I hear this argument all the time, and I want to explain why it's a bad argument. Okay, it says Jerusalem is the number one place for the Jewish people, while Jerusalem is number 3 to Islam. Palestinians lost 4 wars they had with us. You didn't agree to a country. You started a war. You lost. That's it. So a Palestinian reads this and says, I didn't start any wars. I was born here in my village. I need to stay at checkpoints to get from point A to point B. Why the hell am I punished for whatever my grandparents did? That's not how it works. I was born innocent, and I should be treated as an innocent human being until I'm guilty of something. So to blame every single Palestinian for the actions of a few, or to blame Palestinians for the actions of other Arab nations, it's a very bad and
it's unjust.
Quite offensive group generalization, and it's just counterproductive. No Palestinian hears that argument and says, you know what, you're right. It's all yours. It's not productive. We need to speak to the needs and the wants of the Palestinian people. We need to listen to them. We need to hear them out. We need to work from there. It's not about who did this, who did that.
Hey, you convince the convinced. I get this. By the way, the solution that I'm talking about, how many Jews do you think agree with what I say? That we're going to be one state of Palestinians. You know what I mean? But definitely, you cannot blame, a generation that was born, let's say, in the 90s or 80s or even the 70s, regarding what, the grandparents did, even though, you know what I mean? Also look at Israel. We have now great relationship with Germany. So
yeah, right. And some people, my grandparents, they refused to go to Germany because of the Holocaust. They still have that anger towards the past generation, and they kind of take it out on the present population. And I can understand where that sentiment comes from. I get it, but it's just not an accurate way to view people, and it really strips people away from their individuality. It says, it's not about what you think. You're a Palestinian. You belong to these people. These people are guilty of this. Therefore,
it's like that. And
not
before starting the home, I thought that most Palestinians are potential terrorists. You know, before knowing Palestinians on the eye level, drinking coffee, eating maklube, wiping homeless with, and being in refugee camps and in Ramallah or whatever. Therefore, again, I say it again and again, normalize connections between the people, not normalize the military rule. Normalize connections between the people so we can speak and design a different system that's gonna end the military rule. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm with you. So I actually want to build on that point because I think it's super important. People don't know what they can do to help, right? People feel lost. They feel disempowered. This is true amongst Israelis. This is true amongst Palestinians. What seems clear is that there is so much distrust and so much pain from both sides that any solution fails before it gets any traction because of the amount of distrust. Now, there's a lot the government can do to build trust. You know, we could begin to learn Arabic in schools. And whatever I say about Israelis, same goes for Palestinians can do that, but I'm speaking to my own government here. You know, we could learn Arabic in schools. We could learn about the Palestinian narrative instead of refusing to recognize its existence. We could learn the art of effective communication. This is all things that could happen in the school system and on a societal level. As an individual, try to make friends with Palestinians. This used to be an unsafe act, right? You'd need to actually go and meet them. There's a lot of fear there. Today, you could do it on social media. Meet a Palestinian friend. If somebody here wants to meet a Palestinian, reach out to me afterwards. I'd gladly introduce you. Get to know that Palestinian. And same goes with Palestinians. Meet an Israeli, speak to them. And if you want them to hear your narrative, which they've never heard, most likely, listen to their narrative. Ask them about their life, ask them about their perspective, and that will open them up to what you have to say. The path to peace is paved through the humanization of the other. So again, none of us have all the solutions to the conflict, but one very obvious first step is to begin the humanization process en masse, and that is something that every single individual can contribute to.
That's what we do in the home, you know, regardless of the solution, which is not in our hand. I mean, we're not decision makers. We basically humanize. We basically bring people to disagree and understand that it's okay. But listen, don't judge someone just because he is a Palestinian or a settler. Listen, and by the way, also regarding cognitive dissonance, I mean, if you're strong in your identity, in your truth, in your sense of justice, when someone else will try to distort that or to damage that, if indeed your sense of justice and your truth is not steady, not stable, you will not want to hear them. You will shut them off. You will not even want to listen to something different. Yes. And you know what I mean? So basically, we need to, you know, understand that we need to bring people from different perspectives, not the people that already agree with each other like it's a cult. Differences. Peace, again, peace is one big puzzle. You know, we need to collect the different pieces of the puzzle, bring them to one place, and then see in harmony which fit to the frame, which fit to the center, to the right, to the left. Shalom al Israel, Bezrat Hashem.
Amen, brother. Amen. Before we wrap it up, I just want to put a few things out there. If you enjoyed this content, please subscribe to my channel. I'm doing weekly content. This is also a weird ask. I've never publicly asked for this, but I decided I'm going to. I do not do content and activism full-time because obviously I need to make money and pay bills. I recently opened a Patreon. Patreon is a platform where people can support content creators whose content they enjoy. The way you do it is you go and you can contribute $1 a month, $2 a month, however much you want. If I can build my Patreon to the point where I could live off of it, then I will dedicate myself full time to doing these live discussions, to engaging in the humanization process. So if anybody feels like contributing, you know, I would be extremely grateful. And thanks in advance. Also, Inon's contact details are in the description. So please, follow the home, join Inon. Unless you don't like what he said, that's cool too. But if you do like what he's saying, he's happy to engage in dialogue. If someone has a question that they didn't want to ask publicly, if someone wants to engage either of us, feel free to reach out. We'd both love to speak to you.
And if people want to ask me personal questions, like on my Facebook page, my Facebook profile, feel free. And I want to give shout outs. This is the end. We're wrapping up now.
Yeah, we're wrapping it up.
So I want to give shout outs. First, I want to thank you, Adar, for your platform and for your, doing this discussion. By the way, it's the first time I do this discussion, and Israeli media or any media doesn't really, but so I thank you for that. I want to thank Kay Wilson, a good friend and also a great human being, Rudy Rahman, David Aivri from the Shomron, Ishai Fleischer, and Dr. Kehatl, Muhammad Masad, and many, many other people, but especially the Palestinians. I will not say names or where they're from because, again, but from the places which is, of course, Hussan and Bethlehem and Halil and also Gaza and the refugee camp of Arub and the Jewish Tekoa, the Palestinian Tekoa. And I want to say that without these people, I will not think, I will not even want to do what I do. And I enjoy the process because I have friends and I find true friendships. And friendship that's a very sacred thing, like a family, B'ezrat Hashem.
Amen, brother. Inon, it was a great pleasure doing this with you. So thank you so much, and I'd love to have you back, and obviously meet in person as soon enough.
B'ezrat Hashem. Thank you for that, brother.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody. We will